What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we are looking at the captaincy options ahead of Game Week 21. And I think over the last few weeks, the captaincy hasn't necessarily been obvious, but there's only been a few picks that we've been looking at. This week, it feels like the field is wide open, right? There's so many options just due to the fact that there's not really a standout fixture. Some of the fixtures that might look standout, the defensive stats are quite good. Some of the big hitters that we usually look to go for aren't performing that well. So there's lots to talk about in this one. I feel like when we get to the other matches section, we're going to be looking over quite a few fixtures in this one. So keep an open mind, I would say, before you go into this video about who you might captain. Obviously, give it a like if you enjoyed the video and hit subscribe if you're new around here as well. And also, if you're not already following me on Instagram, make sure you do. There's a link in the description below. And obviously, you can just go to Let's Talk FPL and search for that. I'm putting more and more content up on there. So make sure to give that a follow if you don't already. Obviously, Twitter links below as well. But a lot of you already follow me there. Instagram is the one. Love to get to 10,000 followers. So give me a follow on there if you don't already. We'll start off with the fixture that is probably the obvious one if you were going to say that about any matchup this week. Although we said that last week as well. Bruno Fernandes obviously very heavily captain and didn't come out there with any points. In fact, he blanked with 2. But still, the defensive stats over the season are not great. 1.42. To put that into context, it's around about where Newcastle are. Newcastle are slightly worse, but not by a great deal. It's teams like Leeds and West Brom that are kind of the worst in the league, but Sheffield United by no means good so far this season. But you can see from the last 6 or the last 4 matches, they have steadily improved, right? They've come down from 1.42 over the whole season, expected goals conceded, to 0.83, and the shots in the box are right down as well. Now, I had a look at who they've played over the last 4 and last 6 matches, and interestingly, last 2, Man United and Spurs, so not necessarily that easy, and obviously they did kind of stop Man United attacking at all, really. Man United didn't have a huge amount of clear-cut chances in that game whatsoever. And then Newcastle, Palace, Burnley, Everton. So I would say that Everton is usually a pretty good attacking team, although around that time they potentially were without the likes of Luka Dean, Rodriguez, so that would have made a difference. Man United and Spurs we'd expect to make teams like Sheffield United struggle a bit, but Newcastle, Palace and Burnley not so much. So the fixtures have been kind of mixed, but I do think we've seen some improvement in Sheffield United, and they probably have been a little bit unlucky with the amount of goals and stuff they conceded so far. All that being said, Man City are obviously an extremely good team, and they are right in form right now. At the start of the season, people were kind of, I wouldn't say writing them off, but not looking to them as options in FPL or captaincy. Right now, they're looking really good. The main problem, right, with Man City, and as you'll see on the screen, I've only got 3 players. I could add Foden to that, I could add Mahrez to that, I could add Jesus to that, I could put Diaz on there. There's a lot of options. So if they do score, the points could be spread quite thin. I think Foden owners probably consider themselves unlucky to come out of the last game with nothing, whereas Gundogan scores 2 goals from 2 shots and gets 14 points. Obviously Sterling in there as well. Ultimately, I think this is a pretty good fixture. I think, yes, Sheffield United defended well, but they haven't come up against Man City in those last 6 games, and they are a much better team than all the ones I spoke about from an attacking sense. The reverse fixture was 1-1, but I think at that time, Man City were struggling to break teams down. And sometimes you see that, right? The reverse fixture for West Brom was 1-1. And then they played them the other day and they absolutely smashed them. There could have been more goals. So I would expect City to score enough in this game, right? 2, 3, 4 goals at least. And therefore, the prime captaincy candidates are probably Gundogan and Sterling, right? I said in the last video that Foden and Mahrez stats are really good. And if they play and if you own them, they're really good captaincy options, right? If you think they're going to start. But as always, minutes are a problem. And we saw once they were ahead against West Brom, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan and Foden all came off early. Now, that's probably a good thing. That probably means they're starting this game. So if you've got Foden, he's your only City attacker, I think he's a really good option, right? If you think he's going to start. Sterling, always good. 9 shots in the box versus Gundogan's 10. Ultimately, I think if you think Sterling's a good option for this, I think Gundogan has to be as well. 10 shots in the box, 1.39 expected goal involvement over the last 4 isn't bad. Like I said, he was probably a bit fortunate to get 14 points in the last one. I know some people will want to go for a defender as well. I mentioned in the last captaincy video that I was going to talk about the defensive options, and I didn't really go into it too much. The reason everyone loves the defenders right now, especially Cancelo, is the clean sheet almost feels nailed on. Like, how is Sheffield United going to score against Man City? They've kept so many teams at bay. Sheffield United do not have enough to trouble them. I know they just scored 2 goals against Man United, but Man United always find a way to concede against Sheffield United. So the thing with defenders is, well, I never like captain them, because if they lose the clean sheet, that feels like game over. And if you look at Cancelo's 17 points, right, and I'm an owner, bit fortunate with a goal, But outside of that, it would have still been like an 11, 12 pointer, right? So it's still a good amount of points for a captaincy. And the thing with defenders at City right now, the floor, right? So if you think about their points floor and points ceiling, the floor of a defender feels like it starts at 6. Right? No one sees them conceding, so they're getting at least 6, potentially more. And if you look at the attacking stats for Cancelo, because he is the most attacking out of all the City defenders, 4 shots in the box, 6 chances created over that same time, so 10 potential returns. It's not obviously as high as Gundogan and Sterling. You wouldn't expect it to be. But for a defender that's going to get probably a clean sheet, it's not a bad shout. Obviously, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, he got 17 last week. Can he do it again? But I think you have to take this game into isolation. I think a clean sheet looks pretty likely for City, and he is the most attacking defender. So if you're going to attack, if you're going to go for a defender, I think Cancelo is the one. But ultimately, anyone you think that's going to start, Mahrez, Foden, Gundogan or Sterling, they could do well in this. The only thing is points are spread around. So if they get 3 or 4-0 up and Foden scored the goals or whatever, scored like 1 or 2, then we might see players getting taken off early and therefore less minutes. So I think this Man City fixture is good, and I think Man City are good options, but there are plenty of other options this week as well, which we'll look at in a sec. So West Ham versus Liverpool, very interesting, because I think at the start of the season, this is the kind of fixture that you look at and think, yeah, probably going to captain a Liverpool player that week. But you look at the defensive numbers for West Ham, they are extremely good. They're a very, very good defensive side. To go 20 games and only be conceding 6.1 shots in the box on average, and to have brought that down to 4 and 3 in the last 6 and 4 matches, that's pretty incredible. And their expected goals conceded for the whole season, like 1.17 is really good. But to bring them so far down to like 0.64, 0.51, is really good. Now, you look at the last 4 and 6 fixtures, there's a reason for that, right? Palace, West Brom, Burnley, Everton, Southampton, Brighton. They're not necessarily overall the most attacking teams you can face, especially the last 3, right? Burnley, West Brom, and Palace. They hardly had a sniff against West Ham, so they defended really well. It's obviously going to be more difficult against Liverpool. I've spoken a lot recently about how Liverpool aren't. This whole out of form thing is just, I think it was a bit ridiculous because they were still creating chances as we saw last night. The thing is, Spurs is almost like an ideal fixture for them because they were able to get in behind. Like Spurs didn't play particularly well last night at all, whereas West Ham are going to sit in, they're going to sit deep, and they're going to make it difficult for Liverpool to break them down. And the way things have been going recently, they haven't found it that easy to break teams down. I still think they should have scored more goals than they should have, but it's going to be a difficult game. Now, when you look at the players you would go for, right? I've said a few times on captaincy videos, Mane's stats are usually higher than Salah's, right? In terms of shots in the box, chances created, expected goals and things like that. They're usually higher, but not by a huge amount. The reason we all go for Salah is because he's on penalties. Well, right now, as you can see, Mane is on fire, right? Last 4 matches, 14 shots in the box and 14 chances created. That is absolutely insane. 3.46 expected goal involvement. That's nearly a goal involvement every single match, right? Salah, 6 shots in the box, 6 chances created. We saw last night. He's almost like he's coming a little bit deeper and creating chances rather than trying to get in the box. It's almost like he gets the ball, he's looking for Mane. Now, I will say there was a few times when Salah did pop up in the box, and there was one opportunity off the handball from Firmino where he did put a goal in the net. And to be fair, it probably was deserved to be ruled out, but Firmino was being fouled, right? But we won't get into that too much. So Salah did score. Well, obviously it didn't count, so you can't really include that. But his stats are way down. 6 shots in the box, 6 chances created. So I am a little bit worried about him. The thing is, I'd always expect him to go through spells like this. He's been so good. I've said this on other videos. He's been so good for the rest of the season that sometime he's going to have this dip in form. And then suddenly, he's going to come back and absolutely smash it. He hasn't suddenly turned into a really bad player. And I don't think Liverpool have really changed too much in the way they're playing. Obviously, one of the things that's hitting them hard is their defensive injuries. Like we saw last night, Matip is probably going to be out for a few weeks now. Therefore, Henderson is probably going to have to keep playing as a centre-back unless they sign another centre-back. And Henderson missing from midfield is quite big because he puts in so much energy in that spot behind, obviously, the attackers. So I think they are missing Henderson there. They've got Thiago, of course, but he's a different kind of player. He's obviously a great player, but it's not really what or how Liverpool have played in recent times. So I think Thiago obviously great, but it would be great to have Henderson back in there alongside the likes of Wijnaldum as well. So maybe he's a bit of a miss, but it's not hurting Mane, so it shouldn't be hurting Salah either. In terms of captaincy, if you take penalties out of the equation, Mane looks like a great option this week. Even Firmino does as well. He's having plenty of shots in the box, and I wonder how much of that is him saying, look, when Jota's back, you ain't replacing me. But I do think this is like one of those kind of, I don't know, it's like the immovable object meets the unstoppable force, right? Mane and Salah, really good options, Mane in particular, but West Ham defence is so good and they will make it tough for Liverpool. Now, I do think when we talk about the rest of the matches, there isn't really a standout. So if in doubt, going for Mane or Salah probably isn't the worst idea, but I do think there are potentially better defensive or better defensive teams you can come up against, right? Who are basically worse defensively is what I'm trying to say. So I think this is a tough one. Wouldn't be surprised if Mane and Salah come out with points, but it ain't going to be easy for Liverpool at all. So Brighton versus Spurs, another intriguing game, right? This is where I was potentially looking to captain someone, maybe even Kane, but then he's come off injured last night. At half time, and Mourinho's come out and said it's likely that he's out for a few weeks, but he didn't say he definitely was. So we're still kind of not fully knowing what's happening with Spurs right now, or what's happening with Kane in particular, and we may not find out before the deadline. So I've taken him out of here, but obviously if you've got him and there's any indication that he starts, he is an option. The thing is, a bit like West Ham, Brighton's defensive stats for the season are really good. I've mentioned this numerous times that the amount of goals Brighton are conceding is not really in line with how good their defensive numbers are. So 1.07 over the season. It has gone up slightly over the last few matches. They've played Fulham, Leeds, Man City, Wolves, Arsenal, West Ham. So some pretty good teams, especially Man City. And to come out with their defensive numbers looking pretty much as good as the rest of the season is quite impressive. They have conceded a few more shots in the box, but in terms of quality of chance, it's not been that great. So again, Son is an okay option this week. His numbers are quite good. 2.48 expected goal involvement's quite high, a bit like Mane, right, for example. But he's coming up against a pretty good defensive team. And we don't quite know what Spurs will be like without Kane if he is missing out, right? Obviously, they'll put other players in there. And I know there's plenty of stats going around about Son being just as good without Kane, if not slightly better in some cases. And I do think the chances are he probably will play down the middle. He probably will be the focus point of the in the number 9 role, the striker role, forward role, whatever you want to call it. I don't think Vinicius will come in, for example, and Son will stay on the left. Now, when Spurs attack, Son comes quite central anyway. So in that kind of regard, it probably doesn't make a huge amount of difference. The thing this year versus last year, when people are comparing stats, is they had the likes of Eriksen and Ali. Now, I know Ndombele's there. He can be creative for sure. I don't think it's quite the same. So much has gone through Kane this year. He has been the creative force of that Spurs team. It does worry me slightly, but I don't know if it's going to make so much difference that it makes Son suddenly a bad option. So what I'm trying to say is, if you thought that Son was a good option, I still think he probably is. And he's probably on penalties as well without Kane. So that obviously puts up his points potential too. So I quite like Son this week. Arguably, Son is maybe slightly better than Salah and Mane, but I really don't think there's much in it, right? As you'll see when I talk about the other matches, I really do think it's wide open. It's just whether or not you think Son is going to be massively affected by Kane being out. They've obviously got great players. Like, they could play Bergwijn one side, Moura the other, and Son through the middle. A super quick front three, which is going to cause any defence problems. So I guess the main problem is we don't know what they're going to be like without Kane. And we also don't know exactly how they're going to line up. And who's going to come in and how that will affect things. But I still think Son versus Brighton is a decent option, but probably just not quite as good as if Kane was there. So let's take a look at the other matches. And like I said earlier, I do think there's a lot of potential options you could go for. Maybe no standout this week. Everton versus Newcastle is definitely a fixture I'd be looking at. I think, as I said earlier, Sheffield United stats are pretty bad. Newcastle's are worse over the course of the season. They haven't really got better recently either. And also, something you can't even measure in numbers is just Steve Bruce right now. I can't imagine, if it was any other owner, I'd expect that he'd already been sacked. I don't know if Mike Ashley will bother, because Steve Bruce kind of toes the Newcastle line. But the things he keeps saying, something's not right there. Whether he's lost the players, I don't know. But he's even come out today and said, I could show you a bunch of mail that I've got kind of egging me on and saying I'm doing an okay job and things like that, which is just rubbish, right? That hasn't happened, almost certainly. So I do think Newcastle are just looking a bit lost right now. And so Everton's a good fixture. I've said lots of times now, plenty of people have. They've got pretty much their first 11 back now. Looking at the numbers for Calvert-Lewin, they're not great in the his last 4 matches versus his whole season total. But I wouldn't. This is what the problem with small sample size is. He just bad now because of the last 4 games, or is he pretty good because of the whole season, right? His season-long numbers are still decent. I think this is a good matchup. If you've got Calvert-Lewin, always a good option, I think, especially against Newcastle. James Rodriguez, another one as well. I wouldn't necessarily go for Luca Dean just because I could even see Newcastle scoring against Jordan Pickford, even though Everton have been better defensively recently. But Calvert-Lewin, definitely an option. Even like Fulham versus West Brom, if you had Lookman, massive outside punt against West Brom. They're that bad. I think Arsenal versus Man United is hard to call. I think that's a close game. 1-0, 1-1, something like that. I don't really see either side absolutely going for it. Maybe because it's at home, Arsenal might leave themselves a bit more open than they did in the reverse fixture where Arsenal kept it extremely tight. So you could potentially look there. But I just think there's so many other options this week that Bruno Fernandes can probably be overlooked. Yes, he could do well, but in this kind of week, it's probably worth looking somewhere a little bit different, right? And obviously, we don't even know if Aubameyang's going to be back, and it's probably not an option for most people anyway. Aston Villa versus Southampton is somewhere I would look to. Decline's probably a bit harsh for Southampton, but I do think they're looking a little bit worse than they have been for most of the season. Conceding goals, he just conceded 3 to Arsenal. I could see Villa doing something similar. The reverse fixture was that crazy 4-3 game where Grealish got like 14 or 15 points, something like that, in the last 10 minutes, something ridiculous. And I can see Aston Villa doing really well here. Grealish in particular is someone I like this week. I think his goal threat is pretty good. Maybe not as good as the likes of Salah, Son, etc., of course, but he also has massive assist threat too. So I really like Grealish. I could see him getting a couple of returns in this game, and obviously Watkins is always a nice option up front if you want to go a bit different. I'd probably skip Chelsea just because we don't know who's going to start. Like, I could sit here and say Werner, Pulisic, but will they start? I have no idea, to be completely honest. So if I had Chelsea players, I'd probably just hold them, but not necessarily play them. Leicester versus Leeds, again, if we're talking about bad defences over the season, Leeds is definitely one of them, right? So this is a good fixture to target. And I think if Vardy was fit, we would see a lot more Vardy. Well, obviously we're not going to see Vardy captain because he's not fit, but we'd see a lot of people moving off other captains to Jamie Vardy. You could go for Barnes and Maddison. I just worry about, not worry, but I just don't think Leicester are as good without Vardy. And I think if I was going to go for one, same old that I've said for the last few weeks, it would definitely be Barnes. He's going to be the one providing the goal threat. And therefore, he's an outside shot as a decent captain this week. So the main boys are obviously Son, Mane, Salah, as well as the Man City boys. I think Calvert-Lewin is a good option. Right now, I'm struggling to put it on anyone. I think right now, if I had to put it on anyone in my team, it would be Gundogan. That Man City versus Sheffield United matchup. I'm just worried if the points will be spread a bit. And I am considering maybe just going for Salah. I know West Ham have been good, but Liverpool are a different ball game to some of the teams they've played. And if Liverpool can get an early goal, then there could be a decent score in that for Salah or Mane. I don't own Mane, so it would have to be Salah. So that's where I'm leaning right now. But I'm also tempted just to bring in Son for a hit and captain him. I think with Calvert-Lewin, I think it's a good matchup. But for me, playing Newcastle is not quite... It's not massively better than playing Sheffield United. I will say that right now Newcastle look really bad and Sheffield United maybe look like they're stepping it up a bit. So that's potentially one reason to go for Calvert-Lewin. But ultimately, we know that Man City are probably going to score quite a few goals. So plumping for a captain from that fixture is always a good idea. There we go. That's it for this one. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, give it a like and hit subscribe as well if you're new around here. And let me know in the comments below, who are you captaining? Like I said, it's quite open. Right now I'm on Salah. It could change to Gundogan. It could change to one of my transfers in. So we'll have to see what happens. I have recorded this before the press conferences have been up on Friday, basically. I had to do that in order to get the video out. So hopefully nothing major there that would make any of these picks just null and void, basically, and not options. But if there is some big news, obviously take that into consideration when making your choices. When I have made my transfers and captaincy decisions for this week, the first place you'll find it is on Patreon. If you want to check it out, link in the description below. As soon as I've done that, I'll put a post up. There'll be a Q&A live on there by the time this video goes out as well. There's Slack access, WhatsApp access, all that good stuff. So make sure to check that out. Everybody that signs up goes on the Patreon's Legends Wall as well. So big thank you to everyone that already has. And like I said, if you want to try it out, there is a link in the description below. That is super handy. Lastly, if you're not already following me on Instagram, link in the description below for that as well. Trying to get to 10,000 followers, which would be absolutely massive. So if you want to do that, go ahead and hit that link in the description below, or just search Let's Talk FPL. I will leave it there. That's all the content for this week, apart from a deadline stream, which will be tomorrow at 10:15-ish in the morning. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. Obviously, we'll count down to the deadline. I have all my transfers locked in, my captaincy locked in, and all that good stuff as well. Until then, good luck in Game Week 21 if I don't see you before. And yeah, hopefully see you tomorrow on the deadline stream.